You've heard AM, you've heard FM. Now, tune into DM Radio, the world's longest running show about data. Each week, host Eric Kavanaugh interviews the brightest minds in the world of information management. Want to be on the show? Send an email to info@dmradio.biz. Now, here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to the longest running show in the world about data. It's called DM Radio. Yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh, here for a very special Thanksgiving show, folks. I am so psyched about this. We've been planning this for months, and it's time. Fast cars and faster data. Start your IoT engines, folks. Yes, we have a real race car driver on the show today and a couple of race car experts, a visionary of racing, of really cool egalitarian racing, let's call it. Electric cars, all the same cars. It's the Electric Racing Association. One of the coolest experiences I've had in a long, long time, folks. I went over to Belgium earlier this year, thanks to the folks at Software AG, and watched a race car race like I've never seen before. It was really, really super cool stuff. And we have several folks for you today. We have Beth Georgiou, who really founded this whole thing, the Electric Racing Association, and also Bart Schouw from Software AG, and Racer X himself, Ellis Spiezia, is on the line. But ladies first, let's throw it over to Beth Georgiou. Beth, first of all, congratulations on what an amazing vision you've had here. I know how much work it takes to get something like that off the ground, so to speak, if you will, or zooming around the track. And you folks did an absolutely fantastic job and inspired me to get back into this whole motorsport thing. Tell us a bit about yourself and where this all came from. Where'd you get the idea to launch an electric racing association?
Yeah, so well, thanks, Eric. So I'm Beth Georgiou, and I am a co-founder and director of the Software AG ERA Championship. So we have successfully created and launched the world's first entry-level electric racing series. So that means we design and produce our own race cars in-house, as well as manage and operate the championship. But really, we actually view ourselves as a technology company. And really what sparked this was a few years ago, a bunch of motorsport nerds, we call ourselves, really, people in the industry that saw this shift towards electrification, saw how important that was to maintain relevancy to the industry, because motorsport is this research and development platform for the industry. That's how it's funded and stays relevant. And we saw this as not only an opportunity to bring our sport into the world of today and the future, and bring sustainability into the picture of a sport that's definitely not famed for being very sustainable, but also address other issues surrounding equality and diversity and accessibility, which is still a real problem in our sport and it has a long way to go. But we thought, hey, why don't we try and deal with all of these issues at once? So that's kind of been my mission for the past few years. And yeah, so here we are.
And that is just so fantastic. I mean, it was really a wonderful operation, and you can see that reflected in all the people who worked there, right? Everybody was nice, everybody was professional, and you made a really good point that motorsports is all about having fun with cars, with automobiles, right? Having fun and letting anyone get involved. I really like that very open, accepting approach that you've taken, and you get wonderful people as a result of that, right, Beth?
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about being a technology company and a technology platform, and that is what we are. But actually, I also think that we're truly a human-driven organization, and we use technology to bring more of the human element into our sport and to make more people be able to enjoy our sport, whether it's racing, whether it's working as a mechanic, whether it's working in the paddock or as a fan. I think for me, it's really important that anybody from any background has the opportunity to come into motorsport. And it's a sport that's traditionally only for the very wealthy minority of people, and also historically not so accepting of people outside of that group. And I think we can all admit that there's a lot of work to be done there. And for me, it was really important that let's make this something that can be enjoyed by everyone. How do we make motorsport as attractive as football, right? Because anyone can go kick a ball in their yard. How do we bring that with motorsport? And don't get me wrong, we're not there yet, but that's kind of the long-term vision.
Yeah, it's a beautiful long-term vision, and you've made it a reality, and it's growing by the day. So that's awesome. We'll get Beth back in just a moment here. Let's bring in Bart Schouw. The first time I met this gentleman, we were trackside, and my wife, who has MS, her her scooter was damaged on the way over to Belgium, and one of the arms was literally falling off. So I'm sitting there trying to bang this thing in place myself, and I hear this voice, "Shall we give it to the engineers?" I'm like, yeah, let's do that. And sure enough, he takes it down track, comes back 10 minutes later with this perfectly molded, perfectly fixed armrest. And of course, the bolt was so bent that it couldn't use that. So it had a brand new, I'm guessing, titanium bolt. And I was like, I said to my wife, babe, you now have a hybrid Formula 4 racing vehicle. Okay, that's what just happened there. So Bart Schouw, tell us a bit about yourself and your racetrack side moxie.
Yeah, yes, Eric, that I can remember that vividly. Actually, it was really nice, actually, how we got to learn each other. Yeah, so my name is Bart Schouw. I'm from the Netherlands, and I'm the chief evangelist of Software AG. So, Eric, I'm not sure how many chief evangelists you already had in your radio show, although it's long running. So maybe just for the audience, Guy Kawasaki is, I think, the first person that called himself a chief evangelist, and he was doing the marketing at Apple. And he said something like, and so he was promoting the brand, and he said, being an evangelist is a way of life, because you have to show that you have to love what you do in order to actually convince people from what you are selling. So that's, for me, that's absolutely true. I love what I do, and I think that shows also in the way we actually connected together at the racetrack. But if you look for me, what it is really is about, what's important for me is that I help the company to find its point of view. Its point of view on topics that are very topical, like actually right now, what we see happening in our IoT industry is that a number of fairly big companies like Google are sunsetting their platform. So Google, for instance, is sunsetting its IoT core in 2023. And last week, IBM mentioned a similar kind of thing with Watson IoT. They're sunsetting it. And then you get this question, what's happening? What's happening in the market? Is IoT dead? And then you have to have a point of view. You have to help the organization to figure out, no, it's not true. It's coming of age, and these are the reasons. This is what's happening. And so I do that on topical things, but also on the bigger picture. Like the bigger picture for the company is what we are promoting, what I'm actually talking about a lot, is the truly connected enterprise. That's for us, that's really the kind of storyline that helps people to understand why they should work with Software AG, and what kind of value we can help them to bring, because we actually simplify becoming a truly connected enterprise. Now, you can do that in two ways to promote that. You can actually create research, or you can tell stories. And you can tell stories about customers who are using the software, but you can also create your own stories. And that's what we're doing with the ERA. I think the ERA I came across with Beth last year when I met for the very first time. And immediately this was like a match made in heaven with the ERA, because everything came together. Their vision and what they want to achieve connected completely with what we want to broadcast to the world and tell the world about what you can do with our software.
It really is a fantastic story, because you're right, to evangelize, you're usually telling stories, you're explaining things, you're getting people excited is what you do. If you're an evangelist, you get people excited. And yeah, I have to say, what a fantastic route to go down. Who doesn't love race car driving? I mean, even people who say they don't love race car driving, I'll bet they love race car driving when you get down to brass tacks. It's just a fun thing. And we'll double click on some of the technologies here on Cumulocity, for example, the IoT platform that Software AG has built here and is putting into the market. And it's what is used to kind of track all the different vehicles. It's called instrumentation. You're instrumenting all the different component parts, tracking that. I had the chance to ride on the first fully instrumented train in Italy, the Trenitalia train that was fully instrumented about 4 or 5 years ago when IoT was starting to take off. And very interesting points you made there about Amazon and Google sunsetting their programs. I think that
well, not Amazon. Amazon, we haven't heard anything about. So
okay.
that would be news from your side. But for Google for sure, and IBM very recently.
IBM, that's what you mentioned. Yeah, you bet. Yeah. Well, let's bring in our third and final guest here. Racer X himself, Ellis Spiezia, is dialing in. He's a bit weary perhaps from all the exciting races all year long, but gearing up for next year. Ellis, tell us a bit about yourself and how you got into race car driving. Every mother fears their child going into race car driving, but I guess your mom is 100% on your side, right?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Ellis Spiezia. I'm 17 years old, and I've been in electric motorsport for just about 3 years now. So we're closing out the third season. Made the switch from electric go-karts to electric race cars this year. So that was a big jump and super exciting. But yeah, my parents aren't motorsport people. My family, wasn't in motorsport. It's very common for most of the racing drivers that, their mom or dad was involved. My grandpa was a car fanatic. My dad grew up riding passenger seat in an old Porsche. So
Nice.
I think it definitely skipped a generation. But it's been an awesome journey to get to sort of learn the ropes of this crazy business and sport with my parents. But I think, we make a really great team and sort of trying to take a different path than normal. I started with a sim racing wheel strapped to a desk chair, hooked up to my Xbox, playing Forza for a few years, and then sort of slowly took the steps, did some rental karting at an indoor track close to me. And then in 2020, in the middle of COVID, decided that was the perfect time to go and move to Europe for 2 months to do a full season of electric karting in Germany. So it's been a wild 3 years, and it's been awesome to see the technology grow sort of as I've grown as a driver as well. And it's super exciting. We're going to get an even more packed year next year. So this was a pretty awesome first year in race cars, and I'm really happy to sort of get to show young drivers that you can take the electric path a lot.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And maybe I'll bring Beth Georgiou back into this. I think my internet connection is slowing down from all the excitement talking about
Much further than
cars.
even just 2 years ago, which is really, really awesome.
Yeah. And Beth,
Oh, there
your
we go.
family,
We have no internet, so
you're
there we go.
okay. It's all good. Beth, I'll throw it over to you real quick. You kind of grew up around racetracks too, didn't you?
Yeah, so I'm originally from just up the road from Silverstone, and actually my school during my last couple of years of high school backed onto Silverstone, so it kind of was that temptation at the end of class to just go down to the gates of the racetrack and just kind of like peek over and see what was happening. Wow. And then eventually get invited in. That's what happens if you take a long enough time. And honestly, I just started off by taking any roles I could, like obviously voluntarily. So I did a lot of marshalling. I did officiating. I've done a bit of clerking. I've done stewarding. I kind of did anything that someone would let me get experience in. And so when I graduated university, thought, okay, I need a job. Where should I go? So looked straight towards motorsport and started to just really honestly take on any role that someone was willing to give me. I've done nearly everything, quite hands-on, messy work, and it became such a passion for me. But also, the thing that really was a big driver for me was never at that stage seeing any other women in the paddock, or very rarely any other women, and certainly not in the kind of roles I was working in. And so my solution was like, well, if I turn up, then there's one woman. That was really my logic. And so like now I look back, I'm a little bit like, you made a tough choice on yourself. Like you've made a rod for your back, really, because now you've decided that you need to be like a kind of a, not so much of a role model, but you need to kind of make a statement and help show other women that they can be there. But now I have to say there's so many incredible women in the industry, and I'm inspired by all of them every day. So eventually I ended up managing an incredible student engineering project called Formula Student for the Institution of Mechanical Engineers. So this is where universities around the world build race cars. They then bring them in the UK event once a year to Silverstone, and there's this whole incredible event with over 100 university cars. At the time when I was managing this, there were about 30% electric cars participating, and part of the events they do are things like acceleration tests and skid pad, and the electric cars were just absolutely annihilating the petrol cars. And I was thinking, you know, this was before you know, Formula E or things like that I was working on this. So I like, it started making me think, maybe like we can be sustainable and fast at the same time. Maybe this will solve a lot of problems. So I got hooked on the idea of electrification really early on. And I absolutely knew that was where I needed to be. And I needed to carve out a space for myself there because there wasn't anything. Several years later, the dream was realized. But yeah, it really, I was sold from the moment I knew that race cars could be electric.
That's so cool. And that's great advice for any young person out there who is wondering, what are you going to do? And I'll throw this out for all the moms and dads who watch their kids on video games all day long. It's not necessarily a bad thing. You heard Ellis, he was on the video game playing, racing around the track, and you can actually port that over these days. A lot of the simulations are incredibly real. So if you're doing the sim of a particular track like Circuit Zolder, for example, that's a very real representation of the track itself. So you can practice just sitting at home alone. And I do want to get into the cars themselves too, because there's a very interesting approach that these folks have taken at ERA, which is that everyone gets the same car. So the performance is key. How well you drive that car, how well you manage your battery. It's all about the performance. And Bart Schouw, I'll throw that over to you. I think that's a really fascinating approach to take, such that you're kind of leveling the playing field. Everyone gets the same car, and it really boils down to your skill as a driver and as a team, right? Because the team is there in the pit looking at all the data that's coming through, this IoT data, Internet of Things, and giving advice to the driver as they're going around the track, right, Bart?
Yeah, so the whole concept indeed of leveling the playing field is something that really is promoted by the ERA, and we love that concept, because it then really comes down to the skills of the drivers and how they use the information they have and they get in order to make the right decisions during driving. So for this, the cars also are connected in real time to our Cumulocity IoT platform. And that's something quite unique, because I think Beth can also better talk about it, but that's not normal in racing. Only Formula One has this real-time connectivity to the cars where they can actually make those decisions during the driving, while all the others actually do the offload afterwards, and then they have to interpret the race itself. So that's, I think, a pretty cool concept, what we're using over here. And of course, those fast cars also create a lot of data. And especially in electric racing, this data is also of a very strategic nature, much more strategic, because you have to make many more decisions. Also, for instance, on how you use your power wisely. Because you have this battery, and this battery has a certain performance, but that is also influenced, for instance, by the temperature of the battery. So and so you might want to say, okay, I'm going to keep it a little bit slow in this round, so I have a little bit more torque later on.
Yeah, that's a really interesting component of the whole strategy here, is you have to be much more responsible and much more aware of your battery power and what it takes. We were talking to Ellis before the show about why there's only one gear on these cars. I thought that was kind of interesting too. And Ellis gave me just a fantastic line that I used in the headline for my article, which is all the torque, all the time. That's what drivers want. Let me tell you, drivers want torque. Drivers want the ability to move quickly and pass someone when they choose to pass someone. Obviously, safety is always a concern. We're always worried about that kind of thing, but really, really fascinating stuff, really fascinating approach that these folks are taking. So I think we're coming up on a commercial break any second here, but I'll just say, folks, we are putting together the editorial calendar right now for DM Radio. Send me an email, info@dmradio.biz. That always comes straight to me, info@dmradio.biz, and we'll be right back. You're listening to DM Radio.
Welcome back to DM Radio. Here's your host, Eric Cavanaugh.
All right, folks, back here on DM Radio, very special Thanksgiving show, holiday show, fast cars and faster data. We're talking to several experts out there. We've got the racer himself, Racer X, Ellis Spiezia. We have the visionary, Beth Georgiou of the Electric Racing Association, and the evangelist himself, Bart Schouw, on the line. We're talking all about fast cars and faster data. And we do have actually a question from one of our attendees. So maybe I'll throw this one over to Bart to comment on. One of our studio audience members is wondering what kind of volumes of data can Cumulocity handle? And in situations like this are relatively small, right? You've got, probably 20 cars or so, X number of sensors in every car. So that's not the kind of big industrial scale IoT scenario that I'm sure the Cumulocity can handle. But can you talk about, one, the data that you're pulling for ERA at these races, but two, the bigger picture about how much data can IoT platforms consume, and what are the kind of cool things that can happen with that?
Yeah, so how much you consume is really actually kind of an equation, because you can have loads of devices that send relatively small amounts of data in a very slow fashion, like once a day or something, which you normally would see on a LoRaWAN. And then you have this more industrial kind of machines that you might only have a few, but that sends really megabytes of data per hour and even gigabytes a day. So for instance, that would be wind turbines. So one of our largest customer has over 10,000 turbines. So calculated times 5,000 megabytes a day. And then you know what actually kind of a throughput you have to have on such a platform. Then you're only one of the customers that is consuming the platform. So how we do that is that we have a very scalable environment that is completely containerized, and that is running on Kubernetes. So in a cloud, we can scale that up. That's one. And that will help. So we can run multiple instances like that and multiple tenants. And then, of course, we can also make sure that we offload some of this more to the edges. So sometimes a turbine first will do a kind of first data stage, and then it will broadcast its data further to the cloud. So there's also a kind of a staging environment possible. So yeah, that's more or less what's happening. So for race cars itself, it's of course a very interesting nature. That's only for a few minutes during the race that they really will broadcast a lot of data. So that's where we have to optimize for.
Yeah, no, that's really, really cool stuff. And maybe I'll throw over to Ellis to comment on this. Again, the fact that this vision for ERA is that everyone gets the same car, it really puts a lot of pressure on you, the drivers, to learn the car, to learn the battery life. And I love this concept of floating, right? When you take your foot off the gas and it kind of sends the current in the other direction, which kind of blows my mind. Can you talk about that real quick and your strategy as a race car driver?
Yeah, so obviously being a fully spec series, if you're first, you're first, but also on the same thing, if you're last, then you actually finish last. It's not a guessing game of who spent more money. You have some teams in the Combustion Junior series that their tire budget for the year probably is almost what you'd spend to buy the actual car. So wow. It's gotten out of hand in the past few years, especially. So to have ERA do what they're doing as a driver, it's really encouraging to see that, there is a championship where money is not the deciding factor for who's the champion at the end of the year. And it's brand new. It's different. It's forming that path for drivers that doesn't exist yet. So on that side of things, it's kind of like a reset for everybody. The driving style is different, car setup is different, and the lift and coast is pretty fun. Once you get to learn how to do it correctly, it's a blast. Especially in the junior ranks of motorsport, everyone kind of just wants to drive flat out the whole time. But that management, whether it's tires, whether it's energy, is super important for once you start moving up in your racing career. So to be able to learn that at a junior level, I think is probably one of the most valuable things you get from driving the awesome ERA car.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I'll throw it over to Beth too. Again, getting back to your vision, and I can actually, in my mind's eye here, see you peeking through the gates at the racetrack when you're a kid. And what a wonderful way to go, because you saw your path. I mean, a lot of people take a long time before they get to where they understand where they want to go, and you didn't have that problem at all, Beth. And I want to just kind of throw out another question to you about the vision, about the inclusiveness, right? Because you make such a good point that racing historically, Formula One, Formula Two, it's viewed as a very elitist type event, right? Like, as are some of the big international sports like soccer or football, as most people call it. But you had this vision to be much more inclusive, and I think that has shown really brightly on your success story here from the people that I met, who are so interesting and so eclectic and so different. And again, it really drives home the point that we're all in this together. Let's have some fun. Yes, of course, Ellis wants to win the race, as do the other drivers, but it's much more than just competition. It's fun for the whole family. It's fun for everyone to go out and kind of vent and have a good time. What do you think, Beth?
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, we're really a human passion-driven company, and what makes us happy is being able to create a platform that is welcoming for everyone, and create a pool of drivers that will race fiercely on the track, but also celebrate with one another off the track as well, because we are open with all our data. We don't run as individual teams. As Ellis said, all the cars are equal. So that means that the drivers get the chance to learn from one another, because like next year when we're racing, maybe Ellis absolutely smashes one of the tracks out of the park. So then afterwards, after the race, we're going to sit down with all the other drivers and look at how Ellis did, and explain to the other drivers, like, you know, this is what his feet were doing here. This is the line he was taking here. This is how he managed his energy here. And the fact that we can kind of sit down and share that openly. I mean, for sure, that's not going to be for every driver as well, because that's such a mindset change from this normal kind of competitive secrecy vibe. But we are an entry-level series. We're at the start of a driver's career. We're not at the end of their career. So it's all about learning and being kind of a family. And yeah, we've talked a lot about the wealth thing. It's really difficult, because it's a sport where typically you pay to play, and even in the biggest elements of our sport, Formula One, you have drivers in there that have bought an enormous amount of money to be there in their seat, and that's quite different from sport. When you imagine if football players were, you know, paying to be on the team, you can't really imagine it. So we're working to try and secure partners instead with technology firms that can use our cars as a testing platform, that can put some cool tech in there and get like fast-paced competitive results out. That is more difficult than when you do with a road car, because we're really hammering the cars a lot, and use that funding to help make our seat costs as low as possible, and as well as offering several scholarships for drivers. So this year we have run 2 scholarships already, preparing for next year. One of them is with an organization called Racing Pride, which positively promotes LGBTQ+ inclusion in racing. So we have a driver soon to be announced coming through there on a scholarship seat for next year. And we have another competition next week where any new driver to the series can come and do some testing with us, and one of those drivers will be selected to have a seat for next year, for that year. And I mean, they're going to have to work hard for that seat, and they're going to have to be a great ambassador for the sport. But we really want to find ways to encourage anybody to be able to do this. And we can only do that by, you know, partnering with the industry to kind of find funding to do that.
Yeah, and what a great path forward too. And Bart, I'd like to bring you back in on this too, because the really cool aspect of this from my perspective, and you just heard Beth talking about it and Ellis kind of alluding to it, is this sharing of information, right? Not just data on the cars, but sharing of information and insight. And, you know, I'm a big fan of old expressions. There's a great one that says, when you know better, you do better. When people can appreciate the amount of time and energy that goes into a practice, they appreciate it more, the whole big picture, if you will. And what I think is really cool here is that we're all now going to be benefiting from the learning that is happening with your organization, Software AG, of course, you know, sort of underpinning all this. But when you start to learn more about how much energy it takes to move a car forward, about how much energy it takes to get around the turn, about what the impact that is on the car, on the driver, on the race, all these are facets that we had beforehand that we sort of absorbed subconsciously. But when you can actually put a pin in it and look at a graph and look at the statistics to see, okay, if you drive a little bit slower in these early laps, you'll be able to get more punch at the end. When you can actually describe it in real hard numbers and see it on your screen, it becomes a whole different learning experience, right, Bart?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, Eric, I'm glad you raised that point, because we get into the very hard where I get excited, but because my heritage is actually in real-time analytics. That's where my whole career is in. And it's all about, if you want to give those insights, you have to give them timely. And those races like Ellis are really driving fast. You have to also then have, if you have fast cars, fast data and faster cars, you have to have the fastest analysis. So do you know that actually in our Cumulocity IoT platform, we have a hyper-frequency trading engine inside?
No kidding.
So do you know what hyper-frequency trading is?
Sure.
Yeah, so that's what the financial institute used to actually trade all those financial data and to make those split-second decisions, either to buy or to sell shares. And so that technology was a few years ago acquired by Software AG, and that technology is in itself is agnostic to what you want to analyze. And so what we have done is we have added that engine to the platform, and now instead of analyzing trades, it's analyzing the data that's passed by those things, and there you can actually then add your own kind of algorithms in there and saying, look, what is it that you want to look for? And so one of the algorithms that we built to our graphical interface that we added is this regenerative energy, which you also talked about. And when you take the pedal off, then you can regenerate some of your energy into the battery. And now that is not straightforward. You get a lot of data from the car, but that's not the data you get from the car, because you get voltage and you get current. But you don't get this kind of regenerative power, because that's only happening when the energy current is negative. Otherwise, you're using it. So you have to watch for that inverter, and then you have to do that calculation of power, which is voltage times current, and then you have to bring that on a dashboard and give that to the engineers and the drivers. And so that's the kind of analysis we're doing right now. But yeah, we only started, like Beth said, this year, and we're looking forward also for next year is to get more of those insights and really start to use them, and then also see if we can actually use those insights and bring them to life also for other industries, and see if they can materialize in some real benefit for our society as well.
Yeah, and Beth, maybe I'll throw it over to you. We've got a couple minutes left in this segment. You were kind of hinting at this a moment ago, and I think this is a great path for ERA to forge relationships with the manufacturers, with the folks who design these things, the material scientists even, because you're capturing so much very useful data. And if you get the partnership of some of these bigger firms, then they can benefit from all this research that you're doing. I mean, it's a kind of situation where you're getting lots of different bits of value from the same experience, but because you're capturing all the data and because you're so focused on that and kind of where, pun alert, rubber meets road, you're actually improving how the driver's race, but also how the vehicles can be designed, right? Real quick, Beth.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Motorsport has always been a research and development platform, or a marketing platform, essentially. So we really view our car as a technology platform that enables that research and development. So we can easily, and actually very cost efficiently, because we haven't even started to talk about the affordability side of the car, but I think we don't have time for that right now. But we can cost efficiently implement and test high-tech concepts, not only electric vehicle focused technology, but also things like VR, AR, and power electronics. So you know, it's race cars are fundamentally simpler to kind of get in and get dirty with during a race, and we can get a lot of data that you would take weeks to get from a road car, because we're thrashing out and we can easily just stick things in and test. So it's really an exciting platform. And as a startup series in motorsport, which is fairly unheard of as it is, like we need these partnerships in order to kind of survive and thrive.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. And partnerships are going to be key to long-term success. But I love the way you describe it as a R&D platform, because that's really kind of what you're doing. And all the engineers are out there, they're focused on it. The drivers give their feedback, but there is this collaboration all around, of course, the vehicle, the energy it's using, the design point, the batteries too. Like Bart mentioned, if you want to figure out what's happening when that current reverses, you don't get that from the machine. You have to get that from looking at the data afterwards and running some calculations and kind of learning. I was learning about that actually in Belgium, how if you're going really fast, if you pull off the gas, it actually turns the current around. It's kind of like an alternator works, right? It starts charging the battery back up, but that's all you have in an electric car. It's just the battery. You don't have the gas tank. So we even talked about how you have to find new ways to fix the whole thing together, because in a traditional car, you have this big gas tank that you're carrying around. There's no gas tanks in electric vehicles, folks. But we're talking to several experts today. These guys are so much fun. Ellis Spiezia, Bart Schouw, and Beth Georgiou. We'll be right back. You are listening to DM Radio.
Welcome back to DM Radio. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, folks, welcome back once again to a very special DM Radio episode. And in a way, it's kind of a dream come true. And I'm an old kid if you get right down to it. I love race car driving. We have a real actual race car driver on the show, Racer X. I grew up with Racer X, man. He was the absolute coolest character in the world. Of course, for those who don't know, that was from a show we used to watch all the time, and he was the older brother. No one knew where he was, but he was always watching over his younger brother, and that's what was just so cool about it. And he's the coolest driver ever. Well, we have Racer X on the show, Ellis Spiezia, Beth Georgiou from the Electric Racing Association, and Bart Schouw. And Bart, you made a good point in the break there that it's not all just about speed. There's also a mindset issue. And I'm, again, just all jazzed about the learning that we can do about the nexus of the technology, the product. I'm a gearhead, the physics of the gears themselves, of the actual machine, how it works going around the corners. We can learn so much about this stuff. But what's your take on that part?
Yeah, so for me, and it was actually interesting because there was also a question from the audience already about, hey, how does this scale? And I think that touches exactly the three powers I see there, which I call the superpowers, is scale. You need to be able to scale up if you really want to do anything seriously. Then you need speed, which is often relative. Huh? Let's be honest, Eric. I'm not sure if have you ever driven a car in Germany? I mean, you don't need to go on a racetrack. You can just drive in Germany, and then you can race over there. I remember vividly when I went to Hannover Messe, which is a very big exhibition in Germany, and I was driving down Sunday morning in my Audi S5, and I love racing a bit as well, of course. So I was going 240 kilometers. I think that's 200 miles or something. I'm not completely sure how much it is. It's quite a bit, and I was really going on the top of the speed, and then. From nothing, whoosh, this Porsche came by, and I was feeling like I was at a standstill, So, the speed is really kind of always a relative thing. We have to see that, and we're doing our best over here, indeed. But I think it can always go faster. But what really makes it tick, and it would be kind of an equation, is how you can multiply the speed and scale if you have the right mindset.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Maybe it might be speed plus skill times mindset or something like that.
Yeah.
And the mindset is really about motivated people that understand, that experienced motivated people that would make all the difference. And because I believe I said it to you as well, Eric, and Zolder is, in the end, you don't want a line of code. You want a solution, and that solution is driven forward by innovation, and it's driven forward by the people who are using it, who love it, who put a passion into it. And for us, that's very important. So that's one side of it, so the mindset. But in order to help them to speed up, and especially organizations like the ERA, where you have more or less a startup. Beth said that we are just started. This is the beginning of a new era, literally, for them. They are focused on racing in the end, and they are not software developers. That's not their forte. So how can they use this software to the maximum possibilities? And so for us, it's very important that also those technologies are available to non-developers by using these user interfaces which help them to use technology without writing lines of code. You can write lines of code if possible, but we have a lot of user interfaces that are specifically geared to more like the power users, where you don't need lines of code, but we have those drag and drop interfaces, and where they can, for instance, build those very advanced analytics themselves as well, without asking the data science specialists, and hey, come over and can you write me some lines of code? Because that will not help them to speed up those innovations and with their mindset to actually push this industry forward.
Yeah, what a really good point. And I'll just kind of point out for our audience there, these user interfaces, the GUIs, as we call them, graphic user interfaces, the drag and drop, the low code kind of environments, those are what business people want, because unless you are a coder, you don't really understand code when you look at it, right? Now, the coders obviously do, but even coders like some of these low code, or I've heard it referred to as low code to pro code, which I think is a good explanation, because you want to be able to dig into the details when you need to, but the actual end users, not so much. And just to help our audience understand the possibilities here, smart cities, we hear all about smart cities, we hear all about smart agriculture, for example. There are all these things we're learning through IoT technologies and platforms that we can then leverage for urban planning, for just making use of resources, even just understanding how much is it really costing us? How much does it cost to run a power plant? How much does it cost to run a windmill? What are all the numbers on these things, and how will that affect sustainability? And maybe, Beth, I'll throw it over to you to kind of comment on. It was fun being out there in Belgium and seeing all the windmills around us. And if I heard correctly, I think that the whole track is powered by alternative sources of energy, by solar panels and by windmills. Maybe that was a misquote, but it's sort of baked into your vision for what you're trying to achieve here. So even though we're trying to have fun with motorsports, there's a bigger vision of trying to promote sustainability and really opening people's eyes about how many ways that's possible to do. What do you think, Beth?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, sustainability is one of our three kind of core missions behind ERA, with the other two being equality and accessibility. It's really interesting with the whole sustainability thing, because obviously we know that we're in this critical state right now. It's all over our news. We're living it. A lot of us are already living the experiences of global warming, of climate change, and transport is responsible for, I think, about 37% of emissions in 2021, and 41% of that is from cars. So we obviously need to urgently shift our reliance away from fossil fuels. And a thing that I keep talking about this year is the fact that, I mean, during the pandemic and last year, the amount of cars sold actually decreased, yet EV sales are increasing. So we're seeing that positive trend for the industry. So as motorsport is that testing ground, it absolutely needs to stay relevant to remain funded, because otherwise, how can these big brands justify pouring a lot of money into it just for fun? It needs to always be also doing that vital R&D and marketing work. So from our perspective, obviously, from the sustainable side, our cars are 100% electric. But we designed our cars not to be the next kind of super, hyper, mega electric car. We designed them to be small, light, and efficient. So we're the lightest series Formula race car in the world. Right now, our cars weigh just over 600 kilograms. And because of that, our batteries are small. We're not running long races. We're not running Grand Prix length races. We're running what we'd call sprint races. And because of that, we're able to bring mobile batteries to the track, so we can charge the cars at the racetrack using clean energy. So those batteries can just be slowly topped up using the grid at the racetrack itself. And as you saw at Zolder, Zolder's full of lovely solar panels and windmills. But even if it was a remote racetrack, we're able to bring our mobile batteries fully juiced up, so we don't have to rely on a grid at a racetrack. Not a problem with most racetracks in Europe, but it could be elsewhere. And because we've designed our cars to be light and affordable and efficient, efficiency is such a key word, that's possible for us. There's also exploration taking place using recycled materials in the body parts. And I think critically, like, and maybe a boring thing we don't talk about, but our championship doesn't fly around the world. Instead, we're focusing on creating multiple regional series on different continents. So this is a much more sustainable approach to being a global series, because like we can't deny the fact that logistics and freighting and moving things around has a dramatic cost, not only financially, but on our environment as well. So we want to look at everything from a holistic perspective, even if it's just having less plastic waste in the paddock and making sure there's vegan food available in the racetrack. So, you know, we're not perfect, and we believe in being transparent about that. We have trucks this year. Our trucks are not electric because we need an electric truck partner. Anybody out there?
There you go.
But you know, we're honest that there's a lot of work to do, but we want to problem solve so that everybody can stay racing. This sport can continue to exist in kind of in this future, and I think this is the only way to really achieve that. And with the capabilities that we have on data, we can really start to scrutinize ourselves. So obviously, as we've said, we're really in the early days of what we're able to achieve with our data analysis, but the fact that we can make a platform that is accessible to any audience with Cumulocity, the fact that it's that horizontal platform, so they can make a platform that's suitable for an engineer, or suitable for a driver, or suitable for a fan, or suitable for me, that's just so incredible, because we can really get people involved, no matter, as we said, whether they know coding or not. We can make something that's really accessible and really start to scrutinize ourselves and go, okay, what do we need to do to be better, to be more efficient?
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to getting behind one of those wheels as well myself one of these days and zip around that track, because it's so much fun. It really is. And I just love this concept. I think you have the exact right perspective to view this as a large research and development operation. By the way, we're also having a lot of fun. We're also racing. We're also doing cool things with motorsports. But it is because you've instrumented everything. That's the key, folks. That is the key to IoT, is instrumentation, and then being able to capture the data, analyze the data. After the fact, you have all the time in the world. But folks, you've been listening to DM Radio. All right, folks, time for the podcast bonus segment here, and a very special show. We've been talking to Beth Georgiou of the Electric Racing Association, Ellis Spiezia, aka Racer X, and also Bart Schouw of Software AG. Fun stories, interesting things, ways to inspire the next generation of racers out there. Beth Georgiou, I'll throw it over to you. What's one of your favorite stories of being in the business? Was it just watching it all come to fruition? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm still living off the high of the fact that although we launched this at the worst possible time, we've had all the odds stacked up against us. Our story is really a genuine underdog story, and we launched right before the pandemic, and 2022 did not go as planned, because you think, okay, the pandemic's over, but like it's not, because there's all the repercussions. There's the war, there's the ship that got stuck in the canal that has impacted everything. So really every single person that was involved in bringing the series and to launch that first ever race, that history making race in Zolder, and it was so far from perfect, and it was so on the edge of being ever possible this year, thanks to all of the things that were stacked up against us. But really every single person went above and beyond, whether they were on the team, you know, building the cars, or a driver, or a fan. And the fact that we did that, and we showed the world that electric racing can be fierce, thrilling, and highly strategic, and we proved that there's this appetite for sustainable technology developments. And the fact that we were broadcast on Eurosport, which I think was to about 150 million households in 70 different countries and in 20 different languages, and we're just a bunch of underdogs. And for drivers like Ellis, who are at the start of their career, to be able to be kind of elevated on that platform and to get to have their voice as well, like even if I never do anything again in racing, which isn't likely because we have another season ahead, I think that just being able to say that we did something, we started a wave, that's enough for me to just start the wave, you know. That's
awesome. And really, I mean, congratulations. Seriously, it's so wonderful to have you on the show and to explain that too, because I got to see it firsthand, folks, and it was absolutely spectacular. It was so much fun. everyone had such a good attitude. I mean, again, even though it's a competition, we're all in this together. And what a great way to demonstrate the power of teamwork and collaboration, because you have the coders, you have the car designers, you have the engineers, you have the drivers, you have the fans, you have the support group, you have the evangelists out there. And also, I'll throw this over to you. I find it hard to believe that you're only 17, my friend. You seem mature beyond your years, and you found your calling early, which is so cool. What's your favorite memory of how you got here?
Man, it's always tough, you know. I think it really is just you sort of in racing have these moments where things sort of like all just like come together. So getting to drive in the grand finals last year in Bahrain, which was, you know, amazing, driving the electric cart. That was sort of the last big race I've done in a go-kart. So getting to do that as sort of a final send-off before moving into cars, I think was really special. And even in Po, getting to drive on the streets, and, you know, you have close to 100,000 people watching this demo run of this, you know, bare carbon, no livery electric formula car, and, you know, all eyes are on you and you go out and perform. And I think that really was awesome, especially following ERA for so long and driving the prototype car, and then getting to see that was sort of the final form before it got its nice livery and we had a ton more test drivers jump in. So I think that was really an awesome experience to get to demo the car in front of ETCR, WTCR on a street circuit, which is special on its own. So I think that definitely tops the list for me. And it was a blast because, I mean, who doesn't want to drive through streets that you're not supposed to drive a race car on?
I love it. I'm not going to lie. I've done that in my younger days, but luckily there were no police officers
I get to
nearby.
get it all out on the track. That's the best part. I think that's why my mom likes racing so much. Is I get it all out on the track, and then I can, once I get my license back in the States, I can drive nice and civil.
That's funny. Got to get it on the track. That's the way to go. And Bart, last but not least, I'll throw it over to you. It must be so much fun to kind of see it all come together, to see these young folks so excited, to see visionaries like Beth and a salty old veteran like you or like me. We just love watching it all come together. What do you think, Bart?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Love comes together. It's that journey actually that goes nearly full circle since 12 years, because I did bring one slide with me. Let's see if I can recognize it. This over here and over here is my first IoT attempt back in 2008.
No
So
kidding.
I connected a Skelectrix racetrack and had a full game going on over there where we were racing connected with the Skelectrix cars. We had them connected. We had a binary stream that we converted and put on an ESB and an enterprise service bus, and we had an application connected where we could track, and we had the real-time analytics already connected back then, where we could see, because on Skelectrix you can overtake actually, so it becomes quite difficult to understand who's racing it. But that was just fun. And I could never imagine that in those 12 years, we have been building a real IoT solution, a real platform, put all the nuts and bolts on it. And finally, we had then the opportunity last year when we met Beth and Dieter, the two organizers between the ERA, and it all came together. They had the right mindset. We loved what they were doing over there, because it's not only about racing, it's the idea that you actually use it also for the technology, for the better, for the good, and for this more equitable future. And it has also given in our own company such an enormous push on how we actually view this initiative and what we can do with it and how we can support it going forward. So yeah, no, absolutely. That is something that I couldn't predict that happening when I started back in 2008 with this, that we would be here now discussing this together, Eric, on your show, and what we have actually witnessed at Zolder, because that was a fantastic day. I mean,
I love it,
I hope we
folks.
see many more of those.
Well, look these folks up online. Big thanks to Software AG for their vision and supporting this whole operation. And we're going to be hearing a lot more from these folks in the future. You all have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thanks for joining us. You've been listening to DM Radio.